Now that you know what variables are, it's time to start learning specific categories or types of variables. So in this video, we are going to begin with numbers, so numeric variables. These are variables that store numbers, in particular, things called scalars, vectors, and matrices. So I'm going to introduce you to these concepts here in this video. Now, as a reminder, almost every video, not every single video, but most videos in this course have a script. They have a matlab.m file that goes along with that video. And so you can access them all by downloading the zip file in the first lecture of each section of this course. And then it's the name of the file is always going to be on-ramp, that's the name of the course, variables, that corresponds to the name of the section, and then some, single word or sometimes a couple words that is referencing this particular video. So this video is about variables for numbers, and so the file is called numbers. And I've shown you previously how to open up files, but just as a quick reminder, you can either click on Home or you can click on Editor. Both will get you to the same place. And then you click on Open, and then you have to search through and find that particular file. In this case, it's numbers, and then you want to open it. All right, so what I'm going to show you now is how to create variables that correspond to numbers. In fact, the first one is called a scalar, which I don't even have here. So just as a reminder of how this is spelled, so scalar, and a scalar is just a single number. So I'm going to write s equals, and let's say, I don't know, 4.3. So now this is a variable s, and it corresponds to a scalar 4.3. And of course, we have the semicolon here to suppress the output so that not every single line of code gets repeated like this in the command window. Okay, so here we are going to create vectors. A vector is an ordered list of numbers. Now in MATLAB, you concatenate numbers into a vector using square brackets. In general, square brackets are used for concatenation. So this right here is incorrect, and in fact MATLAB is giving us an error message here. It is not correct to write 143. Maybe you think might be how you would write it on a piece of paper, but we need to tell MATLAB that these three individual numbers should be concatenated. They should be grouped together, and that is done using the square brackets like this. So just to show you, here we get a vector. So the answer is 143. So now I'm going to assign this vector to the variable, which is also called vec. Now, when you create a vector in this way, like this, with numbers and spaces between them and square brackets concatenating them, then this is always going to turn out to be a row vector. Vectors can be oriented as a row like this, and they're flat and they go across. Or they can be oriented as a column, which would mean 1 and then 4 below that, and then the 3 below that. So to transform a row vector into a column vector, you can use an operation called the transpose operation. And in MATLAB, you can implement the transpose operation using a single quote. This is not a double quote, like if someone is talking and you're writing about it. This is just a single quotation. Now that transforms a row vector into a column vector. So you can see when I copy and paste this into the command, we still get 143, of course, but before it was 143 across, that's a row vector. Now it's 143 down, that is a column vector. So that's one way to transform a row vector or to create a column vector. A second way is to put semicolons after each of the individual numbers. Now, this can be a little bit confusing at first because there's some overloading. This is a concept in coding called overloading. I'll write that down. Overloading. Overloading, the term overloading, means when the same character or the same operation or the same function has different meanings depending on the context. So here we are using a semicolon at the end of the line to suppress the output. So we're not getting a bunch of output printing out in the command window. But here, when the semicolon happens or appears inside the square brackets, we are actually using that to indicate vertical concatenation. So it's slightly different use of the same character. So let's see what this code now looks like. So instead of having spaces, we have a semicolon in between the numbers. And you can see that that does vertical concatenation. So this is like the end of the first row, and then this is the second row, and here's the end of the second row, and then here's the third row. Okay, so here you go, 2 ways to create a column vector. Now, several videos ago, I showed you how to use the colon operator to create numerical sequences. And here I'm showing you that you can take the numerical sequence, for example, this one is going to count odd numbers going from 1 through 9, and you can use that to create a variable. So now I create a variable skipvec. It's a vector, and that vector will be the sequence 1 through 9 in odd numbers. So we went from scalars to vectors, and then the next step up is to go from a vector to a matrix. So a scalar is a single number, a vector is a list of numbers, and a matrix is like a spreadsheet of numbers. So it has rows and it has columns. Now notice that I'm mixing the 2 ways of separating numbers that I have already shown here. So here I showed separating numbers by spaces, and here I showed separating numbers by semicolons. This is for horizontal concatenation, this is for vertical concatenation. And here I'm actually mixing both of these. So this is pretty interesting. We have the first row, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, and then a row break. So then we get a new row in the matrix, and then 7, 8, 9, and another row, and then 3, 5, 2. So now we can see this variable called amat, for a matrix, is a 3 by 3 matrix. So 3 rows and 3 columns. Okay, so can already tell that something is going wrong here, otherwise I wouldn't have written this comment. And the problem here is that we have the first row with 3 elements, the second row with 3 elements, and this third row only has 2 elements. In a matrix, every row needs to have the same number of elements. You could also say the same thing about columns. So what happens here is that the first and the second row each contain 3 numbers, 3 elements, but the third row has only 2 elements. So Matlab is going to give us some kind of an error message. Now, later on throughout the course, you will learn more about how to decode, how to interpret and understand these Matlab error messages. But anytime you see an error message that says something about dimensions and not consistent, the first thing you should think about is sizes, looking at the sizes of the variables. So in this case, we have the sizes, and the sizes of the 2 rows are the same, and then the size of the third row is different. Okay, so let's look at the variables that we have created so far. We can look at the variables that we've created in the Matlab workspace by typing whos, and then we get a list of all of the variables are ordered alphabetically with capitals first. So if we were to write, let's say capital, maybe I'll do capital Z equals, and just 3 for no good reason. So you can see the capital letters come first, and then the lowercase letters. So, and then we can see the sizes. This is typically the first thing I look at when I type whos and I want to see what are the variables in the workspace. I usually look at the names, and then the sizes, and then the class tends to be the next most relevant thing. Now, if you like to have that little widget, you might also have the, where is it? It is the workspace module. So you might also have this open, and then you can see what's in your workspace immediately without typing whos. I guess I'm a bit old school in this way. It's not so much that I'm old school. I think I like to have a clean MATLAB desktop environment, and this is just adding visual noise. That's what I think. So in this video, I showed you how to create variables that contain numeric information, so variables that contain numbers. Now, so far, all of the variables that we've created were fairly small and so really easy to work with. But what happens when these vectors and matrices get larger and larger and you only want to access some small piece, 1 or a few elements in the vectors or matrices? For that, you have to use something called indexing, and that is the topic of the next video.